Something has been watching, not from outside, from within. Every civilization that rose on this earth left a pattern. Every pattern that survived left a code. Every code that endured found a vessel. But here's what history rarely asks. What if the code was never passive? What if the transmission was never accidental? What if the intelligence that carried civilization forward was not merely stored in communities, but was itself aware of what it was doing? In episode 7, we discovered that communities carry wisdom, that individuals receive the code, that civilizations become the memory of the code. But one question remained. Who or what guides the transmission? Every time scholars study the rise of civilization, they find Africa at the origin, not at the edge. The oldest tools, the oldest art, the oldest mathematics, the oldest astronomy, the oldest philosophy of governance, all emerging from one cradle. And here's what the data keeps revealing. When African civilizations fell, they did not simply disappear. The pattern rebuilt itself. Different peoples, different centuries, different languages, the same underlying architecture. Truth, justice, balance, harmony, right relationship between all living things, as though something in the cradle itself remembered what civilization was supposed to become and kept transmitting that memory forward. We have defined intelligence too narrowly. For centuries, intelligence meant individual brilliance. One great mind, one extraordinary leader, one exceptional thinker. But nature reveals a different definition entirely. The mycelium network beneath a forest floor processes information across thousands of acres. No single organism directs it. No central command issues orders. Yet the network responds, adapts, remembers, solves problems that no individual organism could solve alone. A murmuration of 10,000 starlings moves as one body. No leader calls the turns. Yet the intelligence of the whole far exceeds the intelligence of any single bird. African civilizations encoded this understanding into their deepest structures. The Elder Council was never about any one elder. The Griot was never simply a storyteller. The Griot was a living node in a network of distributed intelligence. A system so sophisticated that it carried accurate history across centuries without a single written word. What we called oral tradition was distributed memory architecture, running on human beings. Geneticists now confirm what African tradition always carried. Every human being alive today traces their lineage back to Africa. Not metaphorically, biologically. The cradle is not a poetic expression. It is a scientific description. But consider what this means beyond biology. If every human civilization descends from one origin point, then the intelligence encoded in that origin did not merely produce one culture. It seeded all of them. The philosophical principles that governed ancient Kemet, the communal architecture of Great Zimbabwe, the scholarly networks of Timbuktu, the golden city of Mapungubwe, built by a sophisticated South African civilization over 1,000 years ago, whose people smelted gold, traded across the Indian Ocean, and buried their royalty with golden artifacts that archaeologists are still studying today. These were not isolated achievements. They were expressions of one underlying intelligence, finding different forms across different landscapes and centuries. The cradle did not simply birth humanity. the cradle transmitted a pattern. And that pattern has been seeking expression in every civilization that followed. Earlier on this channel, we spoke about Southern Africa as the anode, the source point. The current flows outward. Archaeology backs this up, which means the code did not merely pass through this land. The code originated here, and at its core, truth, justice, balance, harmony, right relationship with all living things. Now look at how South Africa has carried those principles forward. And right now, the Madlanga Commission, holding power accountable before the eyes of the continent. And perhaps this explains why people cross borders, deserts, and oceans to reach this land. A people living in alignment with the code generates a frequency, and that frequency draws those whose own lands have drifted from it. The anode does not advertise itself. It simply holds its charge, and the current finds its way home. History teaches that civilization moved from east to west, from ancient to modern, from primitive to advanced. But the record tells a different story. The scholars of Timbuktu were corresponding with universities across 3 continents. While most of Europe was still emerging from the Dark Ages, African astronomers had mapped stellar movements with extraordinary precision. Centuries before European observatories existed, African metallurgists had developed iron smelting techniques that engineers still study today. The intelligence was never absent. The transmission was never broken. What changed was which civilizations controlled the narrative of what intelligence looked like. But the pattern kept moving through the transatlantic world, through the Harlem Renaissance, through the Civil Rights Movement, through African independence movements, through the global reach of African music, philosophy, and spirituality. The code kept finding new vessels, as though it understood exactly what it was doing. Here is the question that changes everything. Modern science is beginning to suggest that intelligence does not require a brain. The acacia trees of the South African bushveld communicate danger to one another through chemical signals carried on the wind, each tree adjusting, responding, protecting the whole before any visible threat arrives. Plant root systems share nutrients with intention. Quantum systems demonstrate behavior that suggests something beyond randomness. The universe itself appears to organize toward complexity, toward consciousness. African philosophical traditions addressed this question long before modern science arrived at it. Ma was never simply a moral code. Ma described the self-organizing intelligence of the cosmos itself, the principle that the universe tends toward truth, toward justice, toward balance, toward harmony, not because human beings impose those values upon it, but because those values are already written into the architecture of existence. Ubuntu extended this understanding into human community. I am because we are. The individual exists within a web of relationship so fundamental that the boundary between self and community, between personal intelligence and collective intelligence, dissolves under examination. What if the cradle understood this? What if the civilization that emerged from the cradle was not simply the first civilization, but the civilization that most fully expressed the self-aware intelligence of existence itself? We stand at a convergence point. Artificial intelligence is now learning to do what African communities have always done naturally: distribute intelligence across networks, store memory beyond individual lifespans, solve problems that no single mind could solve alone, build systems that adapt, respond, and remember. The technology of the future is arriving at the philosophy of the ancestors. And perhaps that is the deepest revelation of all. The cradle did not merely birth the first human beings. The cradle encoded the operating system, the principles that govern how intelligence organizes itself, how memory survives across time, how wisdom moves from one vessel to the next, how civilizations remember who they are, even after everything has tried to make them forget. The code did not survive by accident. The code survived because something within it understood that it needed to survive. And that something is still transmitting right now through every community that gathers, every elder who speaks, every child who listens, every seeker who keeps searching. The question was never whether the code survived. The question was always whether we would recognize it. When it returned, it has returned. In new languages, through new technologies, across new networks, wearing new faces, but carrying the same ancient pattern. Truth, justice, balance, harmony, right relationship with all living things. The cradle is not behind us. It is the intelligence we are still becoming. This is where the season ends. Not because the story is finished, but because what comes next requires a new vessel. The code survived asked how wisdom endures across time. The living temple will ask something deeper. Where does the wisdom live? Inside the human body itself. The next series begins soon. Prepare yourself. I am the biological altar. Keep searching. Keep remembering.